can give you an overview of the situation in the light of the Bible. First, let's look at Vladimir Putin. The last 12 months have been remarkable ones for the president of Russia. He further solidified his control over Russia. So much so that even Mikhail Gorbachev, the last leader of the Soviet Union, recently denounced him for human rights abuses. He took in Edward Snowden and allowed the NSA whistleblower to continue leaking documents that embarrassed the United States and lowered its standing in the world. He bamboozled President Obama into making a deal with Syria over its chemical weapons, an agreement Syria clearly never intended to keep. He helped broker another deal that removed the sanctions on Iran while allowing them to keep their nuclear program. He continued to serve as Iran's protector in the United Nations and the world community, and is now in the midst of helping arm Iran for future battles against Israel and the United States. He turned the new Egyptian government away from friendship with the U.S. and rebuilt old alliances between Egypt and Russia. He hosted the Winter Olympic Games and was highly praised by NBC Olympics host Bob Costas. The Daily Caller's senior editor, Jamie Weinstein, wrote, "If all you know about Vladimir Putin is what you learned from Bob Costas during the NBC's Olympic coverage Thursday night, you might be excused for thinking the Russian autocrat is a great peacemaker on the world stage." For a minute, NBC looked an awful lot like a Russian propaganda network. Among other things, Costas said, just in the past year, Putin brokered a deal to allow Syria to avoid a U.S. military strike by giving up its chemical weapons and helped bring Iran to the negotiating table over its nuclear intentions. Costas failed to mention that in both of those cases, Putin's real success was his ability to outmaneuver a slow-footed and naive U.S. administration. After the Olympics, though, it was business as usual in Russia, with dissidents harassed, beaten, and jailed, and with opposition media shut down. In October of last year, Forbes named Vladimir Putin the most powerful person in the world, ahead of the President of the United States. If his personal wealth were not so shrouded in secrecy, it would probably have named him the world's richest person as well. Last year, Putin was required by Russian law to reveal his salary and net worth. He said he makes a salary of $187,000 and is worth about $180,000. But he was clearly lying. A man with a net worth of $180,000 does not openly wear luxury watches with a known value of over $700,000. He owns a palace on the Black Sea estimated to be worth $1 billion. He owns 20 other mansions around the world. The website, therichest.com, estimates his net worth at $75 billion. That's not bad for a civil servant. A man who has spent his life not in the private sector but on the government payroll somehow turned that government salary into one of the world's great fortunes. Not that he actually needs it. There are a lot of perks that go along with just being the most powerful man in the world. One is that your constituents take care of every conceivable luxury. The Russian government provides Putin with 15 presidential helicopters and 40 private jets, several of them featuring gold-plated interiors. It gives him the use of 4 luxury yachts. One of them is 176 feet long, has a spa pool, a waterfall, and a wine cellar. Another is even more opulent, with 4 decks, a jacuzzi, a barbecue, a maple wood colonnade, and a bathroom faced in marble. A net worth of $75 billion is generally consistent with most media estimates. It would make him the 3rd richest man in the world if that's true. But there are strong indications that the actual numbers are much higher. In fact, He is probably the wealthiest man on earth. But he wants more than luxury, and he wants more than to top some magazine lists of the world's most powerful. He wants to rule and reign like the Tsars of his nation's history and the Soviet dictators of his youth. Except he wants to succeed where they failed. He wants Russia to rule as the world's only superpower while he rules Russia. Then in the midst of Putin's glorious turn on the world stage, little Ukraine had the temerity to rain on his parade. Vladimir Putin wants Russia to rule as the world's only superpower, while he rules Russia. So he didn't take kindly to upstart Ukraine, throwing out Viktor Yanukovych, Putin's puppet head of their government. In Yanukovych's place, the Ukrainian chose Alexander Chertonov as acting president. Chertonov is an evangelical Christian, a Baptist who often fills the pulpit in various churches around the country. With their revolution, the Ukrainians were throwing out more than the corrupt Yanukovych, though. They were throwing off Putin and the death grip Russia has held on them since the 19th century. Vladimir Putin could not allow that. In 2005, he characterized the collapse of the old Soviet empire as the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the century. And in the years since, he has worked to bring the old Soviet satellite states back into the fold. When the nation of Georgia got out of line in 2008, Putin solved the problem by sending troops. You would expect an international backlash led by the United States, but George W. Bush was at the end of his administration, making him a lame duck. And at the same time, he was trying to grapple with a worldwide economic collapse. He spoke out against Putin's military action, but did little else. The new president, Barack Obama, wanted a new relationship with Russia. Understandably, he didn't want his first act toward Russia to be that of imposing sanctions. So he did nothing. In fact, in early 2009, President Obama sent then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton to a Geneva meeting with the Russian foreign minister. She carried the gift of a reset button. They pushed it together, letting bygones be bygones. And Putin got away with the invading of a sovereign state for no good reason other than a lust for power and control. He paid no price then and expects to pay no price now. Ukraine was once the jewel of the Soviet Union, only about the size of Texas. In 2011, it was the third largest grain exporter in the world. Its fertile land has long made it a prize for conquering powers. But it is with Russia that Ukraine seems most completely linked. At the end of the first millennia AD, the areas now known as Ukraine and Western Russia formed a single nation, one of the most powerful in the world of that time, Kievan Rus. Russia conquered and annexed Ukraine several times over the centuries. 17% of the Ukrainians are ethnic Russians. 24% speak Russian as their primary language. Almost all of these are located in the eastern part of the country, the part that borders Russia and the Black Sea. Ukrainian life under Soviet rule was especially severe. One of Joseph Stalin's man-made famines killed at least 10 million Ukrainians. The Russians built a nuclear power plant in the Ukrainian city of Chernobyl. I'm sure you know how that turned out. The worst nuclear accident in history. Ukraine declared independence in 1991 when the Soviet Union fell apart. But the pull of Russia remained strong. Russia is their largest trading partner. They depend almost entirely on Russia for energy. But Ukraine is just as important to Putin. Russia's critical natural gas pipelines in Europe run through Ukraine. Mostly landlocked, much of Russian history is built around the quest to secure warm water ports. That is, ports that do not freeze over in the winter. The Russians' naval base on Ukraine's Crimea Peninsula has long given them their best, most consistent access to the oceans of the world, even during the winter. Put simply, Ukraine is too strategic for Russia to lose. Late last year, the European Union offered Ukraine a trade and association agreement. In response, Putin offered to buy $15 billion worth of Ukrainian government bonds and cut the high price he was charging Ukrainians for natural gas if Ukraine rejected the EU's offer. Not surprisingly, President Yanukovych went with Putin. This triggered the massive protest movement that eventually brought Yanukovych down. The people didn't want more of the same. They saw the possibility for prosperity in European-style democracy and strong ties to the West, including membership in NATO and perhaps the EU itself. Late last month, the protesters seemed to win. Yanukovych fled the country. A new interim government was set up, and elections were set for May. But losing Ukraine was just too much for the most powerful man in the world. With his naval base already in Crimea, Putin had a foothold and a landing site for more troops. He began the invasion with Russian troops in full fatigues and body armor. However, he covered all insignias as if to hide that identity of the invaders. Some came in trucks with no markings or license plates. Not only is Russia pouring thousands of regular troops into the Crimea, it has attempted to capture, occupy, or isolate Ukraine's military and governmental facilities in the region. Russia has even demanded the surrender of at least 2 of Ukraine's warships in the area. U.S. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel said the Russian invasion of Ukraine could be a very dangerous situation if this continues in a very provocative way. Well, wake up, Mr. Hagel. We're already there. The dangerous situation is staring us right in the face. In the military, we still have vast numbers of men and women who love God and sacrifice for the good of America and the world every day. But their work is being undermined by the systematic imposition of immorality thrust on them by civilian leadership. In the last few years, they've been asked to do more and more with less and less. Then, only a couple of weeks ago, it got worse, much worse. As the world grows dramatically less stable with the imminent Russian invasion of Ukraine, the Obama administration announced that it was dramatically cutting our national defense budget. The Army will be smaller than it was before World War II, a war we almost lost because we weren't prepared. Major weapons systems are being eliminated along with the benefits to service members. Just when we need to be at our strongest, we've chosen to become our weakest. When Ukraine declared its independence following the fall of the Soviet Union, it had the 3rd largest nuclear weapons arsenal on the planet. But because the United States and the United Kingdom and Russia signed a treaty guaranteeing the sanctity of its borders, Ukraine gave up that nuclear arsenal. Apparently, they trusted the wrong people. Russia has now broken that treaty, and the United States and the United Kingdom are too weak to enforce it.